You are listening to Words Off the Street, a discussion with police, fire, and EMS writers. We bring you their take on your world. Stay tuned for your host, BJ Schneider.
You are listening to episode 3.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Words Off the Street. This episode, I had a chance to interview author of 1,000 Naked Strangers, a paramedic's wild ride to the edge and back, and currently a writer on the hit CBS series Code Black, Kevin Hazzard. It's an excellent interview. I think you'll enjoy the time listening to his career and the places he's been and some of the amazing experiences he's had. Before we jump into the interview, I wanted to apologize if there's any sound quality issues this time. We were having a little technical difficulty as we were starting the show, but we were having so much fun and learning so much, we just went ahead with it anyway. So sit back, take a listen to our sponsor, and we'll get right to the interview. Today's show is brought to you by Zephos Books, Training and Public Speaking. Zephos Books is responsible for my short story collection, Welcome to New Orleans, How Many Shots Did You Hear? And Volume 2, Welcome to New Orleans, The Life You Save May Take Your Own. These collections are true stories from my years as a cop and a medic in the Big Easy. Zepho is also the publisher of my adventure fiction, A Salty Life and a Trader's Death. This is a tale of a modern-day smuggler and pirate caught in the middle of a fight for gold on the high seas. These books can be found on my website at zephosbooks.net, as well as all your favorite ebook outlets. Zephos Book also does trainings in areas such as tactical medicine, safety, and arranges for public speaking at your function. So go to www.zephosbooks, that's X-I-P-H-O-S books.net, sign up for our newsletter, or visit the Facebook page and follow and get the latest news and releases. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Words Off the Street. Author of 1,000 Naked Strangers, Sleeping Dogs, as well as a writer for the CBS's hot drama Code Black. I'd like to start our show by sharing an excerpt from Kevin's book. Prologue. I did nothing to save the first person who died in front of me. I simply stood watch and let her go. She was old and white and wasting away in a nursing home. Her death was unceremonious but fast, and I was the only witness Earth's final sentry, there to do nothing but close the gates as she slipped through. That's a hell of a way to start the show, Kevin. I got to say, I saw that quote and I'm like, if that doesn't sum up EMS and Words Off the Street for us with discussing those of us in public safety who have moved into writing, that is a great little quote to start with. Definitely kudos for writing that, and I'm guessing that's an actual call, the way you had put it. If it isn't, your writing skills are far better than you get credit for.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I really wanted to start the book with that because I felt that it's one of those things that all of us who have been there can relate to. I was brand new when that woman died, and it was classic, 2 a.m. nursing home call where everybody's asleep, including the staff. And we got in there, and my partner, who was experienced enough to know that the only thing that really mattered in that situation was a DNR, asked for it, and the nurse sort of shuffled off to get it. And while the two of them were talking, this woman just died. And that moment always stuck with me because we were all there for what theoretically, at least in to the rest of humanity, is this huge moment. But you learn over the course of this job how subtle the biggest moments in life can be, and then also how consequential some of the seemingly small moments can be. And I just thought that really set it up very well of exactly how strange this job is and exactly what it means to do it.
Yeah, definitely. You excellently said that such a small moment is so hard to put into words, and I think you did a very good job of it. We've stood over many a person's life over the years, and you witness an extremely personal moment with a total stranger most of the time. We really are the person who is that last vestige for him here on Earth lots of times. It's definitely over the top when you start talking about it, when you realize where you stand, and I think that was very well done. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You were in EMS, you're writing now, you've got a lot of different things, so kind of lay it out for us.
Yeah, so I got into the job, I think, the way a lot of people do. I was working as a reporter. I was young and, in my early 20s, and 9/11 happened. I had a bunch of friends who were in the military, and so they sort of, trot off to war which quite frankly was not something that I had ever been overly eager to do. But I knew, I think the way that all of us do that the people who were off doing this were now part of something much greater than themselves and much larger than themselves. And looking at my friends heading off to this huge moment, I just thought, well, what is it that I'm doing? What am I doing for anyone around me? What am I doing to leave a mark? What am I doing to help people? I'm sitting here, I'm a reporter, and this is interesting, but is it really interesting? Is it something that, is this a life worth leading? And kind of the answer was no. And there just so happened to be one night sort of a large industrial accident. I get sent out to cover it by my editor. And just the course of working on that story, I wound up meeting a bunch of medics and realized very quickly that they were in the midst of something that I was searching for. Very quickly realized, hey, this could be something I could do. And my wife, being who she is, just sort of turned to me and said, well, if that's what you want to do, then do it. And I started looking around for EMT schools. And before I knew it, I was enrolled and sitting in night school almost accidentally. I had no idea if I would be able to finish the course. Like I think a lot of people, I thought it would be intriguing, but I did not know really what it entailed, and I certainly didn't know if I would have what it took to actually do the job when it mattered. So I was nervous when I went through the course, finished, and then started working in 911. Well, actually spent a few months in a private service doing totes back and forth to dialysis clinics and stuff. Paid my dues that way, which I don't think anyone's ever truly enjoyed. And then from there, I got into 911, spent better part of 10 years working at Grady EMS in Atlanta, which is a wonderful place, great people, loved every minute of that job, and really proud to have been part of that great EMS tradition. And then about 10 years in, my son was sick and we had 2 children and there was just a lot going on, and I kind of decided to hang it up. But it was relatively speaking, it was a short career, 10 years, but I really enjoyed it. It changed my life in a lot of ways, and I can't imagine not having done it.
Well, as a paramedic who worked in New Orleans for many years, I can pretty much guess that 10 years in Atlanta is like 20 years pretty much anywhere else in the country.
Yeah, Atlanta's pretty, there are a few cities, New Orleans, Atlanta, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, that are just, you're running over 100,000 calls a year, and it's, you're in there for a 13-hour shift and you run anywhere from 6 to 10 calls, and you're hopping all the time. And of course, as we all know, not all of those are heart pounders. A lot of it is people who are just lonely and need a little company or perhaps a free ride downtown. But that's all part of the gig we signed on for. But yeah, it's definitely a interesting place to work.
Yeah, I joke lots of times that I was the taxi cab for midnight egg salad sandwiches in some senses. I did a lot more of that than I ever did shootings or codes, but it all comes as part of the job.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And I really wish that there was a way you could sit down with some of these young EMT students and explain to them, because there are so many, and I'm sure you've seen this, there's so many kids who come in so hot and they are just ready to roll. And they get burned out very quickly because the job is so much more than that. And it can be great, even those things that we all consider to be useless. There's oftentimes a great use to be had from there if you just approach it from the right mindset. Yeah, that's just something you have to do from the very beginning, but that's definitely a huge part of the job.
I agree completely. I think that writings like your book and some of the stuff I've done and others that I've interviewed, I hope these people who are just coming into public service as a policeman, as a fireman, as a medic, they can look at it and read through and realize that there's a lot of fun, there's a lot of stress, well, as we like to say, it's a shitless job. You're either scared shitless or bored shitless. There's not a whole lot in between. And you've got to understand all those parts of it to be able to do the job for any length of time. It is definitely a job of giving, and you've got to understand that early on, and hopefully they can learn from that. You were kind of set up for success, I guess, in a way, for eventually putting 1,000 Naked Strangers together. I mean, coming with a writing background as a reporter, then coming into EMS. So that 10 years, did you Did you see yourself slowly collecting stories as you went, or was this something on the back end you said, now I need to put something together? How did it come about?
Well, I wrote stuff down through the years, but more just for, my own edification, really. My very first day on a truck, I came home and I told my wife every single story of every single call. And most of them were not anything to remember, but I told her every detail. And 2 days later, we were with some friends and she said, "Oh, tell them about your shift." And I told them again, and she said, "No, wait, you're leaving out all these details." And, it's just like a copy of a copy of a copy. It gets downgraded over time, and I realized that, wow, I'm going to forget a lot of this stuff if I don't write it down. In just 2 days, I've already forgotten all these things. So anytime anything big happened, I wrote it down, but it was purely just so I would have it, because I knew that this was all interesting stuff. But when you do the job, I've never been one of those people who left work and then went home and either read books or watched a TV show about the job. If I was still in EMS, I probably would not watch Night Watch, simply because I don't know why you'd want to spend 13 and a third hours on an ambulance, breaking your back, and then get home and then spend another hour watching somebody else do it. So I had never had any intention of writing, but people love these stories, and I didn't see enough examples out there of people who really embrace the humor and the madness of it all. I mean, and I don't think I'm, breaking any molds by, running calls like people who threw their, women who threw their back out masturbating. We walk into this woman's room and, her dildo sitting on the bedstand, still humming away while we assessed her. I mean, those sort of things that I just didn't see enough of that, of just the insanity of it, the humor of it, the love that, my partners and I had for each other. I mean, these were people that I friends and family still to this day, I think, kind of struggle to understand why we're all so close. And just that bond that you have from knowing that person sitting next to you will be the only person in the world that you have access to for 60 minutes of what could be an incredibly dangerous situation. And the way you rely on each other and come to trust one another and lean into each other. There's all these things that happen, and the craziness, the madness, the excitement, the drama, the boredom. There's a really big Coen Brothers aspect to it all, and I just hadn't seen that. I wanted to know where's the Fargo version of an ambulance, and so that's really kind of why I did it. But it took a long time to come to that. I didn't set out wanting to do it, but just eventually I realized that story hadn't been told, and so I decided to sit down and do it.
That's excellent. When you hit a great point, though, I've read a lot of different works, and I don't know if you've ever had the chance to read On Combat by Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, and he talks about that combat stress and how those bonds get grown even deeper and faster because of the experiences that you go through. That's not anything new in psychology. It's just something that he had put together very well. But it's all about those people we've worked with over the years that who else can you explain that story to and they get it? It becomes part of that tribe that you can tell certain people in your family the story and you're not really sure which way they react to some of them.
Yeah, I know. There's some things you just can't. There's humor to some of this stuff. A friend of mine had a call in which there were three guys driving, and they're on this overpass, sharp bend, and they're all hammered. The one guy's leaning out the passenger window throwing up, and the guy driving veers off the road, leans into the guardrail, and there's sort of a fence at the top of it, and just sort of cheese graters the guy's head down about to halfway through his face. So, just like a block of cheese on a grater, that was what was left. It was half of his head. And when the cops got there, they said, "Who is driving?" And they all pointed to the guy with no head dangling out of the passenger side window. And that's the sort of story that we can laugh at.
Well, of course they did.
And we can laugh at that because that's what we have to see, and there is sort of beauty, grace, humor, and even oftentimes the ugliest stuff. But until you've seen that and you've seen somebody take the piss out of it, then it's hard to sort of laugh at those moments. And so you wind up finding yourself very few people to speak to.
Well, and that black humor is something that's used to diffuse so much of that anger, hate, and sadness you see in so many things. Sometimes the humor is the only escape you have for it.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I mean, what are you going to do? You come through and you have to find some sort of way to, make a joke. I learned that when I was really young. My great grandfather died when I was in 7th grade, and I was sitting at his casket. He was the first sort of person in my family that I was old enough to really understand what was happening, who had died. And I was kneeling at the casket. My grandfather sitting next to me, and my great grandfather was married to this Italian woman, and so he sort of borrowed some of her affectation. And when he sneezed, he would say, "Excuse me," with a sort of Italian accent, even though he was not Italian. It was very funny. It was just one of those goofy little things that he did. And so when we were sitting over his casket, I'm looking at my great grandfather and trying to process this. I'm a kid. I'm upset. And my grandfather just says, "Excuse me," using my great grandfather's affectation. And I laughed, and I realized it was just sort of an eye-opening moment of, oh, I don't have to sit here and force myself to cry or find a way to feel bad. I can remember the good times in this person and laugh at it. And that was a big lesson that I've carried with me. And I think it's something that all of us learn on the street. Is just you have to find a way to look at somebody and make them smile, because it's, oftentimes what you're looking at is pretty hard.
No doubt at all. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. Tell me about Sleeping Dogs.
So I was really young when I wrote that book. I kind of wanted to prove to myself that I could start something and finish it. I think you always hear, the minute you say that you'd like to be a writer, people come out of the woodwork saying, "Oh, either I have a book in me, or I started a book and I just haven't finished it yet." And I realized, oh, wow. So a lot of people have sat down to do this, and for whatever reason, they didn't finish. I just wanted to be good, bad, indifferent. I wanted to be able to say, oh, yeah, I wrote a book, just even if nothing ever happened to it. I needed that for myself. I needed to start and finish it. And so I sat down over the course of a few months and wrote it. Because I was young and inexperienced, I essentially just sort of mimicked what I had seen. And so a second-rate facsimile of A Sun Also Rises. I was a big Hemingway fan. And so it was essentially, if you were to update The Sun Also Rises poorly, that's exactly what that book would be. I got lucky enough. I found a small publisher who liked it, and they put it out, and it was great. It was something I could carry with me for a while I was reporting and sort of working on the art of writing, to be able to say, well, I've done it, and I've got proof of it. I have tangible proof, because anytime you set out in any type of artistic pursuit, everybody around you goes, people sort of roll their eyes. Oh yeah, you're going to do that. Sure. Oh, you're still trying to do that. And to be able to have that and say, well, I have done it and I am doing it, that was huge, and there's not a lot of people get a ton of support from the people around them when they're trying to go out on a limb like that.
True. Well, I'll say two things about it. First of all, if you're going to rip somebody off, you couldn't pick somebody better than Hemingway to do it with. I got to give you that right off the bat. And secondly, that you're right. It's a project that you went into and you completed and did a fine job of it. I mean, I've got several books that are out there, but I have a file folder that must have 7 or 8 books that are either started or outlines or things that I'll get to one day as I work my way through different projects and move forward. And sometimes you look at them and you want to get back to those projects. It's just something else always seems to get in the way.
Yeah, it's tricky, It's so hard to make time for something, and you realize when you make time for work, it's because you have absolutely no choice. You wind up sacrificing other things, and when it's your own project, you're just hesitant to sacrifice the other things that are important to you. And so, to a certain degree, you kind of have to be a little bit selfish and just say, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stay here and get this done. But there's always a million things that you want to get to and don't have quite enough time.
Yeah, and there's always that thing where you have to do that real work so that you can have all those luxuries like a house and food and stuff like that. Too. So speaking of projects, are you working on anything new? We know what we're doing with some of your writing, and we're going to get into that. Are you working on any other projects that we'll be seeing in the future?
Hopefully, yeah. I'm working on the outline of a new book. Publisher has sufficiently satisfied with the first one, and they want a second, so I'm outlining that right now. Working on a couple different TV projects, so hopefully we can make something stick.
Excellent. Well, let's get to what we know everybody wants to hear from you. You had a great thing I got to see the other day. Nothing like seeing your name in big, bold letters on the bottom of the screen, written by Kevin Hazzard on one of the latest episodes of Code Black. let's go back to the beginning. How did you get into this career, and how's it evolved for you? Tell us about it.
Yeah, it was, I guess you could say it was something of a circuitous route that took me there. Essentially, when I decided to start writing EMS story, the things that eventually became the book, I just started writing a blog. And this is probably about '08, I would guess. And, that was kind of when they were really taking off. It seemed like everybody was writing one. And so friends of mine started reading it and really liking it. So I wrote more of them. And it was just one of those things that I tried to keep them fairly short so that people would sit down and read it. And it was just one of those things that just kind of got passed from one person to another person. I was lucky enough smartphones are out, so everybody could get it on their phone, and it just went to the friends of friends of friends of friends. And one of those people was an agent living in LA, and he contacted me and he said, I think this stuff's really good. Have you ever thought about writing a script? And so we started talking, and I wound up writing a script, and that got me opened some doors and got me some meetings. And through that process, I wound up selling a couple television projects. The thing you learn very quickly in TV is that there are about 9 different people you have to sell something to. So unless you sell it to all 9, you really almost haven't sold it to any. Even if you've been paid, no one's going to see it unless all the steps have been cleared. And so while I was, kind of going through that of these various projects, kind of in various stages of development, my agent called and said, "Hey, look, somebody, there's a guy who read your script and really liked it, and he'd like to meet with you. And he's the executive producer of Code Black." And so I went. This guy named Michael Seitzman, and he based it off of a really great documentary, also called Code Black, about life in county ER in LA. And so I sat down with Michael and we were talking, and he was getting ready to do the second season of a show, and he was looking to bring in some new voices. And, I kind of made my case for why I should be one of them, and was lucky enough to be chosen. Spent a season, this past season 2, writing for Code Black, and it was a ton of fun. It was an incredible experience. And television writing is so unlike everything else. In an ambulance, and you can work in an ER, and those are 2 totally different jobs. In some ways, they almost don't match up. If you 10 years on an ambulance and then you go and work in an ER, you feel like you have 2 left hands, because everything is different. All the equipment is different. The things you're supposed to do is different. The way you meet the patient is different. It's all different. And TV writing was the same way. I had done a lot of book writing, but hadn't done a ton of television writing. So it was a great learning experience, had a ton of fun. And then, to be able to in each episode, I sort of contributed, we all contributed parts. And so to be able to hear people speak your words, and then, when it came time for my episode to see my name up there, it was great. It was a great experience.
That's fantastic. I can see that there's a lot of great rewards in it, but you definitely have to be patient. A lot of hurdles you have to jump through just to get the things moving. And then when you're there, it's a different process. As you know, writing your novel and writing the memoir, that those are your words, and although someone may help you edit it and may give you some content direction, a totally different world than sitting in a room with other writers trying to make a character do a thing that you need him to do.
Imagine if you ran a call, and as you leaned over your patient, all of a sudden 9 other paramedics peeked over your shoulder and started giving you tips on how they would run this call. That is essentially that's what television writing is. It's all these people.
So you go to paramedic school every day.
Yeah, it's just really what it is. If you've ever had an EMT partner that's in paramedic school, and everything, they're like, "Hey, I think we should go ahead and we need to throw the identicard at this guy." It's kind of like that. Which is what makes television so much fun. You realize quickly that all these different minds coming together, produce these great ideas, and it's just collaborative by nature. But if you're not used to that, it's a weird thing. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. But it's a lot like showing up on scene and suddenly 10 other paramedics poke their heads out from the bushes and say, "I wouldn't do that if I were you."
No doubt. Well, here's a question for me. I hope some others will get some thought of it, but something I was just thinking of. I mean, you basically write full-time every day for the TV show, or at least it is the full-time occupation. How does that par when you're ready to sit down and start writing, whether it be working on a novel or a blog and that? Do you have to kind of shift gears in your mind and find a new way to approach it?
Yeah, to a certain degree, there are things that I learned from TV writing because every week in television, you're writing a 60-page story. So there's not a whole lot of time to horse around, and they figured out the most efficient way to break story, to come, develop ideas and to figure out what is working and what isn't. So to a certain degree, the like how you break story and how you come up with these ideas, I've continued to use that. On the other hand, television is different. A script, if anyone who's never read one, if you're interested in writing, I would encourage you to do it. It's such a lean document. There's just no time to horse around in a script. Even a slowest, most meandering movie, they only just have so many pages, so many minutes to get it done. And even if it's just 120 minutes of people sort of, staring at the sun, there's not much more you can do if you want 120 pages of people staring at the sun. So whereas with a book, you have time to just, really open up and relax and get into all the things you do. So in a lot of ways, I think writing television is a whole lot harder because you have so little time to say what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I can understand that completely. You almost have to look at the characters and let them fill in those gaps for you. Let them experience outside of what you're writing. It seems a different world for sure.
No doubt about that.
So I've got to jump in and say that one of the things that caught my attention right away when I was looking at your website and when I started looking at some of your background, Kevin, is I'm always looking at people's reviews, book reviews on the things that they've done, and I mean, because as much as this is for two groups of people we're talking about when they listen to this show. It's those in public safety who like to read these books and get inside of the heads of the policemen and the medics and things like that. And then there's the writers who are listening to this show, and hopefully they're trying to gain a little something from the people I interviewed that have lived it, experienced it, the good, the bad, the ugly, as it were. And I come across this, and I'm going to read this out loud. No one has a closer view into our fearful hearts than the paramedic, and no one writes it like Kevin Hazzard. He's given us deep, intimate portrait of the toll it takes to everyday witness our most vulnerable moments. Some nights it's the best job in the world, and some nights the worst, all in the same last breath. Joe Connolly, author of Bringing Out the Dead. I won't ask you how you got that review at all. I will just say, good job. As soon as I read that, I'm like, well, okay, I guess I got to pick this book up and read it now.
I was really excited about that. That was a connection through my publisher that we got that. And, we're really hoping, I think Bringing Out the Dead, because it was a good book, and two, because it became a Martin Scorsese movie. That's the thing that people know. And that was one of the first movies I watched when I got into EMT school. And it is kind of a benchmark for anyone who I've spoken to about the fact that I was a paramedic and wrote, they would always sort of call back that book and ask if anything I had done was similar to that and, what I thought of that. And so to get his opinion on it was great. It was really exciting. That book to me, when I finally sat down to start writing, Bringing Out the Dead really was sort of an inspiration, because you realize that this is one of those weird fields. We aren't cops, we aren't firefighters. People aren't desperate to tell our story, the ambulance story. And, Joe Connolly's book really sort of sheds a light on that. How many other EMS movies are there? I mean, I think Mother Jugs and Speed might be it. So it was really, it made it a challenge, but it made it exciting to have something that was so wide open, that had, ground that had not been trod in a huge sense. There are a lot of great books out there by current and former medics, but they weren't in the sense of cops and firefighters or lawyers, where there are people who make their whole career out of, and become multi-millionaires writing series about lawyers or sort of disgruntled detectives. We're kind of something new. And so there's a big open world out there for people.
No, we don't want to let anybody get the wrong idea. We're completely okay with being multimillionaires.
Yes.
No problem with that at all. But, I always felt that Joe Connolly's book was so good, and I think it helped so much because when you went to paramedic school, every one of his characters in the book, and then again with Scorsese in the movie, you knew all these guys. In one caricature or another, you worked with them over the years, and that's what made it so real. And I also think it's what made people who aren't in the field go, well, none of this can be real. I'm like, yes, I'm afraid to say that that's a pretty good indication of what you see out there. So that was definitely a great catch that you got with that, and him having such excellent words to say about it. You couldn't have asked for more.
And his book, is about people who work hospital-based EMS in a city, and that was a big part of me deciding to do what I did. I did not become a firefighter. I did not work in a fire system. I worked in a hospital-based system, in an ambulance all the time, where what we did was EMS. We rolled up in the white and blue wagon and got our work done. And it's a totally different world. And his book certainly captured that type of EMS. It's a great story. It's just a great story.
Well, let me throw some kind of technical questions out there for you. I always like to kind of take a little toll and hear what different writers have to say. What's the best money you ever spent on writing? Whether it's a program, a tool, a periodical that you stay in touch with all the time? Is there something that you've gotten that you said I'd spend twice that money in the future?
Computer, I would say honestly, the biggest thing that I spend money on as a writer is an office. It's in my house, but wherever we move, I make sure that I have my own office. And you need your own space filled with your own stuff. I've lived in houses before where we didn't have that, and I was sort of writing in the living room, and it's not quite the same thing. You need your own space, you need your own area, and so that is something I'd say that's the biggest thing.
That's a great answer, and I can't help but laugh all at the same time. I just finished building a new office/studio at the house, which is separated from the rest of the house, and thought it would be the perfect place to be able to go and concentrate and set my hours aside to do some writing. And my 10-year-old son has found that it is a great place for playing video games too. So much for having the room to myself. I have to share it now with him, but that's okay. So what platform do you write on? Do you write in Word, Scrivener? Is there any processing program that you like to use? I've been quite surprised by hearing some of the different things people are using nowadays.
Yeah, I'm pretty simple. I use Word, and then I use Final Draft when I'm doing script stuff. Kind of tried and true, easy enough to use, and as long as it works when I turn it on, I'm content.
Don't say that. I've had enough problem with electronics tonight. We don't need any more help. So one of the things that I always talk about, you've mentioned it already, and that's that we're in a very, very unique kind of, I guess we're in a niche, that we're not cops, we're not firemen, so we don't have quite the same following. They don't do a whole lot of deep, dark detective stories with the paramedics. So how did you market your book, 1,000 Naked Strangers? How do you continue that? How are you getting it out there? And obviously something like any of these ER dramas and working with Code Black's got to help in some degree. What are you doing in those respects?
Well, I think the fact that it's been so overlooked really plays in our favor. I think there's room. Obviously, if you want to sit down and write series about a lawyer or a detective, John Grisham notwithstanding, you can sit down and do it because everybody knows people will buy that book. But, we kind of have a unique situation where we have this incredible job that nobody knows about. People really ignore it. Everybody's afraid of the doctor, and nobody wants to think about it. Even when we are described by the local news, it is police, firemen, and other emergency personnel. We're totally overlooked, and that presents us with a great opportunity. You have a chance to go out and tell people a story that they don't know. Nobody has any clue that this is going on, and yet we're as active, if not more active, than everybody else. And so, I think you just have to play it to your favor. So that's how I marketed the book was, hey, there's something that's going on every day right under our noses and nobody's paying any attention. And here's the story. And then just continuing, it is a bit of a niche that we have, and the sort of through word of mouth and some other stuff. There are some schools that have read the book, EMS schools and other things. But essentially, I think a lot of it comes from the fact that there aren't a ton of people who have who have written books about the subject.
So true. It's a big part of what we are, and I think it goes a long way. And the next big question I guess I have is what advice would you give to aspiring public safety writers? I think you've given a good part of that already by staying in your world, staying with what you know to a degree. One of the things that I've seen is too many people who are very good at being medics and they're very good writers, but then they try to take it someplace else so that it adheres to some particular line, some particular genre that they're told it should be in, and it loses something in that. What else would you tell aspiring people in public safety, especially those medics out there?
I would say find the truth in your story and stick to it. It doesn't mean factual truth. It just means whatever feels true to you. And if, I'm quite certain that Stephen King has never killed anybody, and yet he does a very good job of writing about it. So the notion of like, hey, only write what you know, clearly not necessarily true, but you have to be able to find truth in what you're writing. That was the case for me. I think that was why this book worked, just because there was something in it that sort of ignited a passion in me. And a part of that came from the fact that I'd already quit EMS, and I was trying to make sense in my head, even though I didn't necessarily know it. I was trying to make sense of what that 10 years meant to me. When I sat down to start writing, all of a sudden these feelings started coming back, and I realized, oh my God, there was this huge thing happened to me that's never going to happen again. It doesn't happen to that many people. And how did that change me? And then that was the kernel of truth, that even though the book itself is true, that was the kernel of truth that the story hung on. And whatever you're writing, I think you need to find that. And because of what we experience, what we see, what we do, we have access to all kinds of truths. And I know that, there's nothing worse in EMS than coming back and bragging about your calls. I have a tendency to be somewhat quiet, I guess, at times. And people mistook that early on for me just simply being very stoic. And without even realizing what was happening, I realized that kind of got me into the club. I would run a bad call and have a pediatric arrest and come back and not tell anybody about it. And I didn't realize until later that earned me points, that the fact that I wasn't bragging about what I had done made people think, okay, this guy's one of us. And that's great, because this job is about simply doing something very difficult and then walking on to doing the next thing. But don't forget that each of those things that you do, they leave something of a mark, and there are lessons to be learned from all those marks. And if you plumb that and you figure out what's there in you that was left from the accumulation of all these things over the years, you have great stories to tell. And so that, I would say, figure out what that is. That's your kernel of truth. And whatever your story goes, start from there and let it build around it.
I think that's an answer worthy of anybody who puts pen to paper, Kevin. Readers can tell when what you're telling is not truthful. If it's not part of your truth, they can tell, and they will lose interest. If they feel the emotion in it, they will follow you to the end of the earth and back, no matter how you get them there, because they feel those emotions with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, and just to put the little out there, Mr. King, if you have killed anybody, it's completely okay with us.
Yeah, we're cool. Cujo exonerated him from anything. That book is good enough that whatever he may have done in his non-office hours, that's his business.
Let me throw a couple of casual things out there. I mean, I think we've had a great interview so far. I always like to wind down with just some fun, casual stuff. One of the big ones I always ask is, who do you like to read? You know as well as I do that being a writer, reading is a serious portion of being a writer. You have to be well read in different genres and different areas. It's how you make that brain work as you put those words down. We know you like Hemingway. Who else do you like?
Yeah, you got to read a lot. It's such a huge part of it. I'm a big fan of Sebastian Junger. I think everything that he's done has been great. And I've read a lot of his, it's just great nonfiction, as is Peter Matheson. Tends to be a little bit heavy, but his stuff is great. I really like Richard Price. I don't read a ton of crime writing, but if you're looking for someone who can tell a crime story, but that has real soul to it, and is just a bang-up writer, you can't do better than Richard Price. And there's a book that I read recently called Ghetto Side that I would highly recommend to anybody. It's a nonfiction that reads like a novel. The woman who wrote it is an LA Times reporter, and she somehow figured out how to turn facts and statistics into this crazy page-turning story. So those are some of the big ones.
Excellent. And anybody who could take statistics and make it interesting, they need to write more. We need more people like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's an incredible book.
All right. So, what platforms do you like? Are you a paper guy? Are you an ebook guy?
No, I have to be paper. There's something about the tactile experience of holding a book, opening it, turning the pages. I don't know what it is. I guess it's probably the same way that there are some people who are just record people. I'm personally not a record person. I just don't know enough about it, but I get it completely. And that's why I'm with books. And in fact, once I've read them, I can't get rid of them. So we have bookshelf after bookshelf after bookshelf in our house because my wife is the same way. So I'm a paper guy.
Oh, you're so lucky you have a wife who loves books too. My wife loves electronic books, so she looks at me like I'm from Sanford and Son as I continue to collect more and more books.
Yes, that's it. That's exactly it. I hear the theme song every time I walk into a bookstore.
So, are you still involved in EMS in any way, whether it be doing ride-alongs or doing any teaching or talking with anybody?
I've started to get into doing some talking stuff. Got contacted by some agencies out here to come and speak. I got out of the field, and just because of the reason I got out of it, of having a lot of stuff to do at home, I didn't keep up my certifications. But have started since the book to do some speaking.
Well, I'll tell you, we would love to have you in Vegas in August. EMS World Expo will be back in Las Vegas in 2017, and some friends that I work with that do regular podcasting with will have the podcast booth at the expo, and we'll be doing 3 or 4 different pod series while we're there. And if you happen to get in over that way, we would love to interview you again when you're there.
Yeah, I'd absolutely love to make that. That'd be great.
All right, Kevin, so tell us where we can find you, where we can find your books, and where people can just drop in and say hi.
The books are at any bookstore or Amazon, whatever's easier. I've got a website, it's kevinhazzard.com. It's Hazzard like Dukes of, with 2 Z's. There's a way to send emails and stuff. It's always great to hear from people. There have been a ton of EMS people who have contacted me since the book came out. A few of them have kind of chewed me out a little bit, but by and large, it's really been super positive. And though I didn't set out to write the book specifically for us, it was very important to me that people who have done the job felt that I did a good job of representing it. It's been great to hear from people. It really has.
Well, I think it's been great having you on. I will make sure that we have all your information in the show notes so that anybody who wants to get in touch with you can find you. And let's face it, we all have a few people who don't like what we put out there, but it's usually the silent majority that has a much better appreciation for what we do.
Yeah.
Keep doing what you're doing, and we'll be looking for your name at the bottom of the screen as we watch Code Black on CBS, and hopefully we'll be seeing you in print soon enough with more and more interesting tales.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, a big thank you to Kevin Hazzard for coming on the show. I'm going to have to run inside and set my DVR just so I can get the latest episodes of Code Black and make sure I see his name down at the bottom of the screen. Got to follow our paramedic brothers. It's awesome to see him out there. Hope everyone enjoyed the show, even with the rough sound. Remember, all the links for this show and Kevin can be found in the show notes at www.wordsoffthestreet.com. Thank all of you for listening. I'm sitting here with my son, Blade. Say hi, Blade.
Hi.
Remember, you can always find the show at wordsoffthestreet.com. You can find us at Facebook at Words Off the Street. And you can always send us an email at streetwordspodcast@gmail.com.
Bye. See you next time.
You heard him. See you next time, folks.